Welcome to the weekly Underrepresented in Tech vlog with Michelle Frechette and Allie Nimmons. Underrepresented in Tech is a free database built with the goal of helping people find new opportunities in WordPress and tech overall. Let's dive in with this week's vlog.
Welcome to our next vlog. So my name is Michelle Frechette, as most of you know who watch our vlog. And today I have my very good friend here, Maryann Reissig, who is visiting us today in place of Allie. Hi, Maryann. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. And one of the things I wanted to talk about on our vlog is ableism and how people who have disabilities, whatever that disability is, can sometimes face issues in public, in jobs, in lots of different places. You and I were talking beforehand that neither one of us has ever not gotten a job because of a disability, which is awesome, because I know that there are people out there for whom that's true, has been true, that they've not gotten jobs because of the disabilities that they face every day. But you and I haven't had that experience, but we have had other experiences.
Yeah.
For sure. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about ableism today. Now, you're not private about the fact that you have a disability. I'm not private about the fact that I have a disability. I have fibromyalgia. I carry extra weight, and there are times when I just can't walk right. And I use a cane, or I even have a scooter, or, for example, in airports and things where there'd be a lot of walking, I use wheelchair service. And that helps me a lot. So, yeah. And I know you deal with this.
Yes, similar. Yeah. So I have cerebral palsy, and I'm on the mild end. It's just affects my lower body, and my gait is definitely not your average gait. So yeah, but that is diagnosed when I was about 2.5, I think, something along those lines. So yeah.
So something you've dealt with a lot longer than I have, for sure, because fibromyalgia doesn't usually present itself until later on, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
and yeah, it's interesting because just as I get older, I've learned so much more about this as someone aging with cerebral palsy, with CP. It's very it's been a struggle, because you're like, I can't do all the things I used to be able to do, and so I've been learning a lot about how to deal with aging and the aging process with when you have constant different kind of movement of your body and what it does, and that kind of thing. So if anybody is also dealing with that, there are lots of it's hard to find resources sometimes, but I've been finally been able to. I could probably even give you a list of good places to go and just read about it, and kind of, you're like, what do I do with this? So yeah,
for sure. This last year, I would say actually the last 3 years, I went from being able to walk, albeit painfully and out of breath through an airport, to just not being able to do that, and just like being just beside myself because I thought I was going to miss a flight, because it just seems so far to walk. And for the first time in 2018, I used wheelchair service in an airport, and it was like, wow, the lights came on, like, why wasn't I doing this before? Yeah. Because it's a free service. Now, I tip people, so it does cost a little bit extra, of course, because if somebody's going to push my ass from one end of an airport to the other, they deserve a little something extra, right?
I do get that, but I have a bit of a problem with tipping for those services in the airport. I feel like if you have to use those services, you may not be able to afford that.
Sure.
So I really I've had a couple of kind of awkward moments with people who were expecting tips, and I didn't have money on me, or I kind of left the situation feeling bad, and I just wish we could change that culture of tipping sometimes, because maybe they should pay those folks a better wage, for this super important service that they provide people. Like, I'm always so grateful for the same thing. Like, I'm always so grateful for the service. I'm always so grateful for help that I receive. Yeah.
So I don't know, and I don't always tip unless somebody's been super kind and that kind of thing. I've had people who were pushing wheelchairs in an airport treat me poorly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, isn't this your job? Like, aren't you supposed to help people who can't walk the length of the airport? But one fellow was just so rude about pushing me that he asked a passenger to help him push me up the ramp, which was mortifying to me.
Oh,
Absolutely mortifying.
yeah.
I'm like, you're asking a stranger. It's not his job. And now I'm feeling like really, really, embarrassed. And and when he got me down to baggage claim, he stood there like I was supposed to give him a tip, and I just glared at him like, no fucking way, buddy.
Yeah.
You don't get to make me feel.
I think I had the same experience with that same guy, honestly.
Yeah, and I was just like, you don't get to treat me like shit, and then stand there with your hand out like I'm supposed to give you money for that, because no, you don't.
Right.
You're not going to get reimbursed for treating somebody poorly.
Right. And
but
yeah, no, I think it's just like having that. There's a lot of blame, like you see in society about, people walk into situations with bias or, what have you, what they're bringing to the table is not always what is really in front of them. And sometimes it's hard to like get past that, to kind of swim past that jerk, and yeah, for sure.
No, I've had people like look at me weird, like, why is she in a wheelchair? Like her legs look like they work, or things like that. Or you get to just sticking with the whole airport thing, like they get to the point where like you're gonna go through security, and they're like, well, can you walk through there? And you're like, well, yeah, I could walk 10 feet, right? Like, and then people look at you like, you just got special service. You got pushed to the beginning of the line. Like they're in a hurry, so like you do get some preferential treatment, right? But trust me that the rest of my life does not make up for that. Like,
right.
So it's not like the whole rest of the world.
If I had a choice, I'd rather be in line with you than not being able to stand for long periods of time. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I did a poll yesterday on our Twitter account where I asked, like, what do you think that people hear the most who are disabled or deal with chronic or chronically ill? And I read those. I think, so one of them was like, well, you don't look sick. Another one was like, all you need to do is eat better. Another one was, you just need more exercise. I thought of another one since then. I'm like, well, have you tried essential oils?
Oh yeah, that's my favorite. Or, growing up, so like, I can tell you some funny things about like when I was a kid. I remember people wanted to pray over me and to touch me, just because thinking that if they prayed over me that I would get up and walk normally, or I shouldn't even use that word, but typical. I'm really trying to get that out of my vocabulary, because it has a purpose, but it's kind of doesn't really work in our world anymore. Right. I try to tell my kids, I'm like, we're all we're all unique, and everybody has a try to use the word typical situation,
typical or average. I think sometimes I've heard
and just try to get that out of the vocabulary, because we all bring something to the table, and Absolutely. We all and I was if you see me in a wheelchair going through the airport, like, nothing about me, you don't know that, and I don't owe you an explanation either, right? Exactly. So sometimes, because a lot of times you feel like you have to explain yourself, or and I've had my family like explain me to strangers, and I'm like, afterwards I'm like, you didn't have to do that, like we don't owe anybody anything, right? And I guess but if I had this conversation with you 20 years ago, my whole stance would be different, but I am where I am now, and you have a lot of life in between, and you learn what you can handle and what you can't. And I mean, I feel like I am surrounded by so much love and support, and in my life, I've really built something wonderful. And I'm so proud of that, and I'm so happy to have the people around me that I do. And it's hard. Some days are tough when you're just like, oh, there's the pain is up here, and I just want to be left alone, and please don't touch me.
Yeah, exactly.
And but we all have those
Yeah.
days. Everybody has those days, right?
Yeah. Now, I know you're kind of a web accessibility expert, at least you're my guru expert on web accessibility. But instead of talking about web accessibility, which is a huge topic and it's all over the place, I want to talk about tech accessibility when it comes to physical accessibility at conferences, especially. So a few years back, we had the last one in person, WordCamp US.
Yeah.
And I specifically asked, it was the first time it was in St. Louis, and I specifically asked if all of the rooms were going to be nearby each other, because if I was walking like I had at the last WordCamp US, which was in Nashville, I knew I wasn't going to be able to deal with the whole venue because it was so far to walk just to lunch and things like that. And I was assured that everything is really nearby. Well, between the time that we were planning it and the time that I was actually going, my walking had, what's the word I want?
Deteriorated
enough that I really did need a scooter. And so we rented a scooter for that. And it turned out it was a good thing, because what's nearby to an able-bodied person is not nearby to somebody who looks at, 100 yards and thinks that's a marathon.
Yeah.
And so, when people are thinking about putting together an event at a venue, thinking not just about, are there elevators and are there curb cuts? Yes, those are great things to take into mind, of course. Yep. Are there stalls that you can use a wheelchair in? Those are great things to keep in mind. But if you have events that are at one end of the building and then somebody has to be at the other end of the building in 5 minutes, and they're walking with a cane, or they have a limp or whatever it is, and a walker, and they're not using a rolling device.
Yeah.
It's Herculean, right?
Yeah.
And so I've dealt with that. I don't know if you've experienced that. It is so exhausting.
Yeah, I've definitely gone to a couple of conferences that were like that it was all marketed as like, oh, it's all in one building, and it's all, but like to get to lunch was a half a mile walk in the same building, so it's definitely looking at it. We kind of talked before about any kind of physical barrier that you see, and like for doing WordCamp Rochester, figuring out the venues for that. And I felt fortunate in my situation, because I could actually say, okay, is this too far away? Coming from my own experience. And we had some of those issues too. And like, so the one thing that I made sure that a lot of, and somebody else may not have done it, I made sure I had a golf cart to take people to lunch that needed it, and that wouldn't have been available if I wasn't one of the organizers, so it's those things, like just keeping those little things in mind when you're, looking at your physical space and seeing, looking at it through somebody else's eyes that may not be able to get from A to B in that 5 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. Another thing that I've encountered at WordCamps as a speaker is a raised platform without a ramp.
Yeah.
So, and to some people, it's like, well, it's only 2 steps. And yes, I can do 2 steps, but 2 steps is still difficult, especially at the end of day 2.
And I might fall.
Right? I mean, I could fall. Anybody could. I mean, let's face it, any able-bodied person or whatever typical person could still fall. But yes, those of us who can't lift our legs as easily, right? My toe can catch on that bottom rung, and it has. At an Airbnb, my toe caught on the bottom rung for a WordCamp Buffalo a few years ago, and I went down hard on those steps, and I still have an indentation in one of my shins from hitting that. I hit it so hard. But right, and you don't want to see that. You don't want to do that in front of a room full of people.
No, that's the like what is it we
Yeah.
always talk about? I was like, "Are you all right?" I'm like, "Yes, just my dignity is bruised," you know.
Yes, exactly. A dignity for sure. But the blood will
Hmm.
go away, but the dignity will hurt forever.
Right.
But if you do have a raised platform, are you sure that none of your speakers need
Hmm.
accessibility? You know, and
Right.
yes, we ask that
Right.
question now, um, but sometimes people still don't think about what that means. For me, I got to WordCamp Boston, and there was just a one step up onto a dais, but I would have had to stand for 45 minutes to deliver my talk. And so I
Oh,
asked for a chair. I always ask for a chair to be able to sit down and do my talk. But now the podium was higher than my head. So how was I supposed to do that? So
right.
they ended up moving the podium to the floor, which then was at desk height for me. But it was like all these accommodations in front of a room full of people when they knew that I had an issue and they waited till the very last minute to make adjustments. It's
Yeah.
still embarrassing, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So
Not
keeping those things
embarrassing
in
to
mind.
me. I'm like, do it up, do what you got to do.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that at all. And I think that I honestly, it's, I think it's getting better. And maybe I'm just,
Mhm.
do I have rose colored glasses? I don't know. I think there is, um, that if we were talking about this 40 years ago when there were no,
Yeah.
you know, cutouts in
Curves,
the
yeah.
sidewalk, in the curbs, you know, if the ADA or, you know, any God love Judy Human and all the work that they all did, you know, to help people like us
Mm-hmm.
going forward. And she's like my hero. So anyway, but just, you know, making that we are, you know, we're not hidden away anymore, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
I
that
guess
it's,
maybe
yeah,
it wasn't so much that was embarrassing. Certainly, the thing in the airport was embarrassing, right?
yeah,
When somebody grabs a stranger, um, it's just that it throws your whole like thinking. I'm about to give a speech. I'm about to give a
yeah,
talk. Everybody's watching in the room, and now we have to take 3 minutes or 4 minutes to make adjustments at the front. It just throws your gate off. Not your physical gate, but like your
yeah, yeah,
mental, your mental thoughts process
absolutely.
off. So
Right, right, yeah,
so
absolutely.
that's unfortunate when those kinds of things aren't taken into account early enough, I think.
Yeah, that's a really
So,
good. That's a real like I will remember that going forward. You know, doing any of kind of um, event planning kind of stuff. It really is,
mhm,
and you know, folks really appreciate it too. And even the people who don't necessarily need an accommodation,
mhm.
after the fact, they'll say, "Wow, that was such a great venue because everything was so close together," or "It was so easy to get in and out of the rooms." Like it benefits everybody,
It
right?
really does.
So it's not just the people, you know, like you and me who really need it. Everybody benefits. You know, it's
Mhm.
not um, just for folks like you and me. That's what I say.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it the benefit is wider, and people like they didn't even know that how good it could be. You know, when you make something really accessible. So
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And the more you can include people, the better the experience, right? So if you and I were
right.
excluded because we couldn't attend an event like that, they've missed out on some pretty good people that they could have
Right.
talked to. You know,
Right,
'cause
absolutely.
we're pretty
And what
awesome.
yes, you are pretty awesome. And there's so much like getting that kind of just learning about other people's experiences and
Hmm.
learning from, I mean, there's a lot that you have to offer to the world, you know, that we have to offer to the world. And yeah, I am much more you know, the getting the experience with all different walks of life, all different, you know, I can't stress how important it is for, you know, to have that inclusive piece to any kind of event you do. You know, it really, I mean, I never remember seeing like even like when the president's talking now, like they have or the governor or anybody that they're talking, they always have a sign language interpreter. Like we never saw that growing up. And now it's like at every speech, and I just I it's I love it so much. You know,
So
like
much better.
it's so much better because now you can talk to everybody in their native language, you know, like what works for them. And I love to see that. And it's, and there's no special door you have to go in, or there's no like any, you know, that it's just all there, you know, for everybody to, you know, to enjoy whatever it is, you know, like
Right.
I feel like it just makes everything everything better.
Yeah. There are no second class citizens.
Yes. Right.
Exactly. What's one piece of advice you would want to give to people in general, not just not just organizing events and things like that, but when you think about people with disabilities, physical disabilities especially, and you think about the general public, what's one thing you'd want the general public to think about when it comes to other people with disabilities?
I think that like have an open mind, first of all, that the person in front of you, they're a person.
Yes.
And they have a life. And I've gotten away from, I mean, growing up, there was a lot of like people would assume I had, you know, a developmental disability because physical equaled, you know, a mental or some kind of delay or something, you know, like, and I mean, and as soon as I talked to them, then that kind of went out the window. But there was that bias, there was that preconceived notion of who that person was in front of them. So I think my advice would just be have an open mind and acknowledge the person, you know, acknowledge the person's humanity in front of you, because at the end of the day, that's what we all are, you know?
Absolutely. I think that one thing I would add to that is every disability is invisible.
Yeah.
You know, so I've seen stories of people who are amputees get reamed out by people for parking in handicap because they get out and walk. And then they pull up their pant leg and they're like, you don't think this is a disability? Like,
oh God, yeah.
Like it's a titanium leg. Yeah.
Right. Or that whole, you know, that they just, that those assumptions are made that, you know, or they think they know you, or they think they, you know, I don't know. I've been touched many times without, because people thought they were helping me. And I'm like, that's one other piece of advice. Like, don't touch someone in public. I mean, now it's way different. Now we're in, you know, COVID world. But like, don't, if you want to offer help, awesome. But don't touch anybody unless you give them, like, you have explicit permission, because I've been given help before that was not
helpful.
Not helpful, but I didn't need it and I didn't want it. And it was those can lead to some very awkward moments. And I shouldn't ever have to feel bad for somebody else's, you know, lack of understanding of how to handle a social situation, you know?
Exactly. Don't push somebody else's wheelchair. Don't, you know, assume somebody needs help standing up. Don't grab somebody who's blind because you're going to show them the way. Like, none of those things are okay.
Yeah, I know.
None of them. So.
And also, I just want to say, like, at the end of the day, if you see somebody at the end of the day and like, I'm exhausted, you know, like the amount of energy it takes me to do something is higher than you would think. And my, you know, some days I'm like, okay, it's time, I need some quiet, you know, and give that person the space for that. So
that's great advice, because as soon as we're done recording here, I'm going home and sit on my couch.
and you deserve it.
It's been a long day. That's right. It's 9 o'clock at night. I've been here for 12 hours. It's time, baby. It's time.
Yeah.
Maryann, thank you so much for being so open and talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank
everybody
you.
out there. Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for being here. And everybody out there, we'll see you next week on the vlog. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but we'll figure it out in the meantime.
It'll be great.
We hope this has been helpful. And if you have ideas for us, things that you'd like us to include, just let us know on underrepresentedintech.com. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with a new vlog. Until then, find us on Twitter at underreptintech. Add yourself to or search our free database at underrepresentedintech.com.